Great. Hello everyone, and welcome to the World Transformed session this evening. We're lucky enough to have a screening of the film Injustice. This is a fundraiser screening for the National Memorial Family Fund, which is a great cause. We're honoured to be joined by the director of Injustice, Ken Fero. He is a director, lecturer, activist, founding member of Migrant Media, that's produced some hard-hitting documentaries on BBC and Channel 4. Injustice hasn't actually made it onto BBC and Channel 4, but we'll learn more about that later from Ken. We're also joined by Michelle from National Memorial Family Fund. This is a really important cause for us to support, show solidarity with, and donate to. It provides much needed support to families and families and friends who know people who've died in police custody, whether that's providing grants or helping them with their campaigns. So we'll hear more about that from Michelle as well. Also joining us is True Powell. It's just joining us now as well. True is another representative for the National Memorial and Family Fund. So we'll be hearing from him and Michelle later. So the format of this is we'll hear from our speakers, and then at about 5 minutes to 8, I'm going to be sending through on the chat a Vimeo link so that we can all watch the film. So you just got to click the link and you can watch it on your computer. Yeah, so let's get started. And first of all, we'll hear a little bit from Ken.
Hi everybody. I'm okay with people showing their faces instead of talking to like a blank wall with names on. So if you want to show your face, please go ahead. And also if you want to ask questions, please go ahead. Hi Trevor. So basically, I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened after we made the film Injustice. Some of you may have seen it already. It's been around for 19 years. And in the past 19 years, we've had literally thousands of screenings like this. Well, not like this, but actually physical screenings. And it's been seen by millions and millions of people because it's been broadcast in lots of countries around the world, but not the UK, as Ollie just mentioned. I'll get back to that in a minute. Basically, the film is about the film follows a group of families during the 90s as they struggle for justice for their loved ones who were killed in police custody. Within the film, we have one case of murder and 3 cases of manslaughter. And the evidence from that was gathered by the state, plus investigations from the family. And the evidence was then taken to barristers and Queen's counsels, and those opinions of murder and manslaughter came from those independent barristers and QCs. Unfortunately, the state, in the form of the Crown Prosecution Service, didn't agree with that. And so this is why, when we made the film, we did an investigation and found out there were 1,000 deaths in police custody between 69 and 99. And not one single police officer had ever been successfully prosecuted for those crimes, which is something which is unique to the UK. France, America, many other places prosecute successfully police officers. There have been 7 or 8 in France. I know for a fact there have been some in the States as well, of all places. And yet Britain hasn't done that yet. And the film tries to explore why that is. And it was the first film to really break many of the barriers and taboos. One of the barriers we broke was that we decided to name and show the police officers who had committed these crimes because the evidence was very clear, and we wanted some action. And we knew that as filmmakers, we had to take a position. So when we made the film, to be honest with you, when we started, we had no idea it would take us 7 years to make this film. It took us 7 years because we had absolutely no support from the broadcasters in this country. They were absolutely sure there was no story there. We were told by Channel 4 that there was nothing there to investigate. There was no story there. If they'd listened to us in 2001, perhaps we wouldn't be in the situation we are in today. And I think the fact that Channel 4 refused to screen the film, despite the fact that we challenged the police officers to take us to court and they declined. They accused us of libel and incitement to riot, which we defended. They backed off, and so that would have been the opportunity for Channel 4 to show the film and to bring this situation to the attention of the people of this country. They declined to do that in 2001. They declined to do that in 2005, and they declined to do that 2 months ago or a month ago. And we went back to them and we said, look, the situation now is different. Isn't it time that people saw this film, given what's happening across the world and in this country? And their answer was, no, it's not time. They said they have another project. They're doing some kind of feature film about the subject, which is great, but we weren't quite sure why you could only just have one film about deaths in custody. After all, they have 5 cooking shows on every day. Yeah, one film about deaths in custody is apparently good enough for Channel 4. But I think they won't show this film, and you may agree when you see it, is that because it shows people unifying against the state, it shows resistance. It's not a victimology story. It's very much about how people can organize. And in fact, when we made Injustice, Injustice was the reason that the families came together to form the United Families and Friends campaign. And so that was one of the great things the film did, to act as a method and as a tool to organize people. And now other organizations have come to fruition since then, including For Whatever, National Memorial Family Fund, who do some great work, and we work with them all the time. I'm not a very articulate speaker, which is why I make films, because I think images can say a lot more than words sometimes. And I think there's a lot of stuff online. I think bringing up to today, 2020, we started making films around this issue when we began with the case of Joy Gardner, who was killed in her flat in North London in 1993 in front of her 5-year-old son. There was a trial for that case. The officers were found not guilty. Myrna's still fighting for justice. Graham, her son, is still around, still trying to get his life together. These are all people who have been completely ignored by the state. And I think we have to make a parallel between the issue of racism and the issue of police violence, because the issue of police racism is something which this government and this country is aware of and has actually done something about. And by that, I mean they did have the inquiry. I've forgotten the guy's name. Everyone's muted and I'm trying to name. Yeah. So, but we didn't need a Scottish judge. I've got nothing against the Scots, but we didn't need a Scottish judge to tell us about racism. But nevertheless, they had that, and we have the Stephen Lawrence Day, and we have the Stephen Lawrence Institute, and we have a recognition of that case, and it's right that that was recognized. But the question is, why was the case of Joy Gardner, who died at 2 months, 2 months separation between her and Stephen's death, Myrna is not recognized. Myrna doesn't sit on any committees. There's no institution for Joy Gardner. Nothing happened to those police officers. And that tells me that the issue of racism is something which the state is quite happy to engage with, although they don't really do anything about it. But the issue of police violence is something they won't touch. And that's what this film is about. It's about tackling the issue of police violence that leads to death. It's the tip of the iceberg. Since we made this film, we've made a few other films, but we've made the follow-up to Injustice, which has been selected for the London Film Festival and will have its first screening on the 12th of October. So that is progress, because it's good that the BFI have backed it. I mean, I have to say, when we made the film, we had no idea what would happen. We had no idea what the impact it would have, and it had a huge impact politically, culturally, and in other ways as well. We'll have to see what happens with ultra-violence, which is the follow-up to Injustice. Hopefully you'll get to see that as well. And yeah, please keep in touch once you've seen the film. I don't know if you guys use Instagram, but yeah, if you use Instagram, we're Migrant Media. If you don't use Instagram, all our work is on Vimeo, and Ollie's gonna send you the link so you can watch Injustice there, but you'll be able to watch all the other films as well, like Justice Denied, which is a film by Joy Gardner, like Popo, a film about Jason McPherson, like Who Polices the Police, about Sean Rigg. I can go on and on. So there's a 25 to 30 year history of resistance to police violence by the families and by their supporters. And it's really down to you guys what happens next. And it's up to the whole of society to decide what happens next. Are we going to continually allow these deaths to happen? Are we going to become fixated on America and forget the fact that these things are happening here and they're just as brutal? The words that are used are exactly the same. The response from the public is different. The response from the government is different. We have a prime minister who can talk about George Floyd, but won't talk about Kevin Clark. Yeah, he can talk about Breonna Taylor, but he won't talk about Mikey Powell. And I think that's the issue that we have at the moment. And we welcome what's going on. We work with Black Lives Matter. It's a great movement. It's good to see youth on the streets. I have a lot of hope for the future because the young people today are very different to 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And that is really what ultraviolence is about as well. It's about leaving a legacy of resistance. Yeah, please spread the images and spread the words. I'm done.
Okay.
Over to you, Michelle.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Ken. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we're going to hear from Michelle, the National Memorial Family Fund. At the end, there might be a couple minutes for some questions. So if you've got any questions, just hold them to after you hear from Michelle.
Sure.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Michelle Kelly, and I'm a representative of the National Memorial Fund and the Friends of Family of Mikey Powell campaign. I'm a qualified counsellor, mentor, and we provide resources and services in supporting people that are marginalised within our community. Just really want to share a bit with you about who Mikey Powell was and how his fund and the Friends of Family of Mikey Powell came to fruition. Mikey became unwell in terms of his mental health in 2003. And on the 7th of September, the police were called to the family home to support Mikey. He was in the custody of the police when he died, but Mikey wasn't actually committing any crime and he wasn't actually under arrest. The police were called to take Mikey to a place of safety. Back then, police stations were a place of safety. What then followed was the police turned up. They drove a car at Mikey. When I say drove a car, the car was parked. They reversed the car, then drove the car at Mikey. He was beat with a baton. He was CS gassed, and he died after they put him into the back of a police van. Police van was a van for officers to sit and for them to go and attend to their calls. It wasn't a van that was made for the transport of the public. What they did was they placed him in a position that further compromised his breathing. So Mikey actually died from something called positional asphyxia. So based on the fact that there had been numerous deaths previously in custody, what tends to happen is officers are trained, they have their health and safety training, all that seemed to be ignored. And one of the key things as well in terms of Mikey's death was that when the police actually attended the property, some of the key things that they didn't do was actually listen to the family who knew Mikey best and advised them how they could best support him. Based on that, he had an inquest about 6 years after his death. Family were very dignified in their fight for justice, and what they demanded was that there was openness, transparency and cooperation from the police. In 2015, on the 12th year anniversary of Mikey's death, the National Family Fund was launched, and that was set up in conjunction with Migrant Media, the United Families and Friends campaign, and Tipper Naftali, who is Mikey's cousin, and his Forward Ever organisation. This fund is quite unique in that primarily it actually recognises people that have suffered an injustice, like a death in custody, whether it's immigration, police, the mental health services. It actually recognises them as victims. Often when you lose someone to a death like this, the burden is actually on the families to prove that their loved one has been murdered. So almost like Ken was explaining, the evidence is there, but they just don't acknowledge it. So that's one of the key things that this fund does. It says to families, we see you as a victim, we know that you've suffered injustice, and we are here to help. So this fund is a permanent fund, which means it's not just for 6 months, a year. It's a national fund, and the resources that it provides are to support families around things like bereavements, funeral costs, because it can be quite expensive when you lose someone and it's quite sudden. Also for counselling and therapy services, so they're actually recognising that there are areas of support that are quite needed for these families. Because they aren't recognised as victims, the statutory services don't actually support families in the way that they need to be supported. They provide respite breaks, and after 5 years of funding, this fund was launched the 7th of September this year, which was on the 17th anniversary of Mikey's death. In the future, there are loads of national events that will be developed. Also, they're looking to develop a regional helpline so that when families across the country do experience a loss, they can call and maybe then be signposted and connected to organisations that are able to actually help. I think one of the key things this fund does is actually recognise that intersectionality within communities is something that families that face injustice do face. The extra burden, financial burden, of when they need to attend meetings. And on top of that, once they've been impacted by such a traumatic death, often their mental health is something that also needs to be considered. But because they're so caught up in the fight and trying to gain justice, their mental health is probably something that fails or becomes quite ambivalent. Just wanted to read something from Tipper Naftali, who is Mikey Powell's cousin. He actually gave up a job and his life in London to come to Birmingham and actually fight for justice for Mikey when they took his life. And I think it's really important to recognise the unspoken victims. So Mikey died, he left 3 children, 3 boys. And in terms of boys within our community, between the ages of 5 and 11, young black boys are 3 times more likely to suffer from depression than their white counterparts. So if you imagine such a traumatic death and the way that Mikey died, having young children like that, they're more prone to be experiencing depression. Precursor of stress, anxiety is that they produce more cortisol, so physical health can be impacted. So in terms of type 2 diabetes, they're also in that higher risk category. So all of these things kind of impact. But Tipper said, working in the community since 1979, I've always been committed to developing practical solutions to social hardship and injustice. And I see the National Family Fund as such. This fund forms part of the lasting legacy to my cousin, Mikey Powell, who died in police custody in September 2003. And just to really touch on the legacy that Mikey has left, he didn't die in vain. Like I said at the start, the family were very dignified in their approach, and what they were saying is, we want to be at those tables and we want to be taking you to task when we need to be. I've actually worked quite closely with Tipper, and we've sat on like mental health advisory groups for the police, and we've been advising them in terms of what a therapeutic contact looks like when someone is in contact with the police. We've been able to do that with the police, a number of organisations, and some of the key things that came out of not just Mikey's case, but families who had gone to inquest and had the recommendations. Something called street triage. Tipper had been quite heavily involved in advising. That was a pilot program where they would send out a mental health nurse, an unmarked police officer and car, and also an ambulance technician to someone when they dialed 999 out in the community. So often when people are unwell, they may see the police or an ambulance as a threat. So an unmarked car helped them to support people within the community, getting the aid there when they needed it. Also, I mentioned earlier that when the police actually placed Mikey into the back of that police car, it wasn't, or the police van, it wasn't a van that was specific for transporting the public. They're no longer allowed to do that, and they have vans that are specific for the public. So the family campaigning has been really, really fruitful in terms of the outcomes and some changes that have been affected by Mikey's death. Tipper's his heart and passion of dealing with injustice. And I think this fund literally just says to families that your life is of value, and that's what this fund says. True, is there anything you'd like to add to any of that?
No, Michelle, I think you absolutely covered it all. So thank you for that.
Okay. Yeah, so I just think this fund really, really recognises the context of the community and the cultural competence. And cultural competence, I don't just mean being someone of colour. Within that community, like I said, there are loads of issues around intersectionality. So if you are a young black boy of colour within a certain age bracket, you're more likely to potentially be on the pipeline from school to the prison system. Mikey's children actually two of Mikey's children fell into that category because of his death, and they were then faced with the father deficit. I don't think those things are actually picked up, and this fund recognises those things. They recognise that services need to be created to support families like this. And I actually run an organisation, and my constitution is based on supporting BAME people and also those most marginalised within the community. And that has kind of stemmed from the work that Tipper does, understanding what those needs are and really addressing the needs of the community so that we can start building community equity and allow people to actually just feel safe. That's it.
Thanks so much for that, Michelle. Yeah, so I think it's just important to hammer home how we're about to see an incredible film. It's going to be hard hitting, but yeah, this is the time to kind of look into the National Memorial Family Fund, especially this like current political moment. You know, people are really galvanized at the moment. If you've been looking for ways in which to support BAME communities, this would be a really good place to put your money or just your effort and show some solidarity. We've got a few minutes left. First of all, I'm just going to resend the link in the chat box. There it is. You see the Vimeo link there. In a short while, around 8 o'clock, we'll just be following that all together, and you can just watch the film. In the meantime, in these last 5 minutes, I wanted to open up to any participants today. If anyone had any questions for Ken or Michelle, feel free to ask them. Either you can turn on your voice or you can type them in the Zoom chat, or it's up to you.
There's a lot of links in the chat, so it'll be, because this disappears, doesn't it, after we got off? So just to remind people, we've got the Channel 4 petition to get injustice shown. We've got the link for the Memorial Fund. We've got the service that Michelle provides. We've got the link for Instagram. And if you don't use Instagram, I've only just started recently, to be honest with you. People use Facebook as well. You can get in touch on Facebook. Please keep these links. And I know they're on TWT as well. and spread the word around.
Yeah, and just to say as well that, you know, this film is really, really important, but what it shows is what life is like for some people living in this country. It can be quite emotive, but if anyone feels like they might need to talk to someone or a bit of support, our organisational link is also in the chat, and I'm happy for anyone to contact us and for us to have a conversation if we can support you.
Very cool. Everyone's in a very mellow mood on a Sunday night, I guess.
Yeah, Tipper, you want
Yeah,
to?
can I just jump in here?
Of course.
I hadn't planned to make this because I was supposed to be somewhere else, but I'm here. So can I just say, really, first of all, thank you to True and Michelle for agreeing effectively to talk in my absence, although I'm not absent now. And I just want to thank both of them, not just for being sort of family, but also for stepping in. This isn't the first time on my behalf and on Mikey's behalf to speak, to tell his story. And secondly, I want to thank Ken because about 2 years ago, I almost gave up on the family fund because I didn't feel that the campaigning community were supporting it enough. There was too much liking and tweeting on Facebook and no one was putting their hands in their pockets. And I was beginning to lose the will to keep it going. And it was Ken who kept telling me, Tipper, don't give up on it. So Ken, I want to thank you for that. Yeah. And for yourself, TWT, thank you so much for not only for giving people the opportunity to see this important film, but also exposing them to what we're trying to do with the Family Fund. So thank you guys very much. Cheers.
Thanks so much, Tipper. If there are no other questions, we can move on to the screening. I will be sending out an email pretty shortly with these links in it. To add, there's a World Transform Community Forum that's been set up. And if you go on it, there's different threads for different sessions that have happened. It's a really useful resource. And I'm going to create a thread for this with the links in, but also a space for people to talk about what they've seen in the film. And yeah, just a space for us to debrief.
Yeah, Ollie, thanks again. Just to echo Tipper's words, thanks for hosting this. This is a film the police tried to kill. They tried to ban it. So after 19 years and millions of viewers, for us, every single viewing is a victory. And every single person that sees this film is seeing a film the government and the police don't want them to see. So you're all armchair activists at the very least, but we're hoping that you're going to do a lot more than that after this film with all these links. You know, I just want to end on a point of hope, if we can, because it is possible for us to get these officers in jail. Everything that's being done in terms of prevention and negotiating with the police, that's great if it prevents further deaths. But we do have a legacy of 40 years of killings in this country, and many of the families and their children are still waiting for justice. So let's not say it's impossible to get these officers who are still working, some of them, in fact, some of them have been promoted, to the European Court of Human Rights. If we can find people that committed crimes in Nazi Germany or crimes in Eastern Europe in the 90s and take them to criminal courts, we can certainly do the same with these officers. So I'll just end on that note. Thanks, Ollie.
Great, thanks so much for that, Ken and Michelle and True and Tipper and everyone for being here. Yeah, so if you follow the link on Vimeo now, you can watch it, and hopefully on this space, on the World Transform thread, we can also talk about it afterwards. So thanks so much for joining. I'll leave the Zoom chat up for a while. If you've got any problems following the link, I'll be on here for a while. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.